What's up, everyone? What's up, everyone? Mitesh here with MTech, and today we are talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is photography, and more specifically, mobile photography, because most of us, our primary cameras are going to be our smartphones, and as good as smartphones have gotten, there are still times that I want to use manual mode over just trusting the camera. As good as my Pixel 2 is, there are still times that I know I'm going to get a better picture if I just put on manual mode and set all the things for myself versus letting the camera decide. So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to use the manual mode on your phone so you guys can get better pictures, especially in low light where most phones tend to struggle, but if you guys have a manual mode with you and you guys have maybe a tripod, you can get some pretty great shots. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, a lot of Android phones have manual mode already built into their cameras, but in case you have a Pixel like I do or an iPhone, you won't have those modes built in, so I'll leave a link to some apps that you can download. Some are free, some are paid, but all of them will give you manual control over your camera. Alright, before we get to the phone, let me go ahead and explain a couple of things that you need to know about photography, a couple of key terms. First one's going to be ISO, so it's ISO, and it basically means how sensitive your camera is to light. Now, it's a bit of a double-edged sword in that, one, if you get a higher ISO, you will actually get much more light in your picture. So if it's indoors, if you have a high ISO, your images will come out much brighter. But along with brighter images, you will get a lot more noise inside of your images, so it will appear grainy and blurry and all that stuff. So ISO is very much a double-edged sword. I typically keep my ISO between 100 and 800 or 100 and 400. The lower the number, the better it is, really. And next thing you want to know is the shutter speed. So the shutter speed is how long your shutter stays open to let the light in. So the longer the shutter, the more light you'll get in. The shorter the shutter, the less light. If you're taking a picture of a moving object, the shorter the shutter is, the much better because they won't be blurry. The longer it's open, the more likely the object is going to be blurry. So if you're trying to take a picture of like a kid that's running, you're going to want to usually use a very fast shutter. Honestly, if you're taking a picture of somebody that's running or sports or something like that, you probably just want to leave it on automatic mode just because you don't want to deal with trying to set it up. Setting up manual mode does take a little bit of time, so if you're trying to shoot something that's moving, just go ahead and use automatic because it's not worth trying to fiddle around with all the settings in manual mode. And really, that's pretty much all you have to know about smartphone photography. There is another important term in photography called aperture, but for most smartphones, they all have a fixed aperture except for the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus, but majority of the smartphones, basically all other smartphones, have a fixed aperture, so it's not something you can change, so not something to worry about when it comes to manual mode on smartphones. Alright, I think that's enough of explanation. Let's go see what it looks like in real life when you change these values, so let's go!
Alright guys, so turns out Lightroom for some reason would not let me record while I was doing it, so instead we are going to be using manual camera to show you guys. And the thing is, most of these manual cameras are all the same, so it really doesn't matter what camera app you're using, you're going to have the same controls in all of them. They may just look a little bit different. So this is an app called Manual Camera on the App Store. Once again, I will have it linked to it in the description, so you guys can definitely go check it out. But here it's got all the controls that you could possibly need, and most importantly, it's got ISO and it's got the shutter speed right there. So those are the two most important things that I've talked about so far, and the two most important things you're going to see here. Some other controls you get are focus distance, so you can actually change the focus distance here. So if instead you want to focus on, say, Wonder Woman and not Spider-Man here, you can do that, or you can focus on Spider-Man. Do whatever you want, really. You can either set it up yourself, or you can set it the manual as you would normally. White balance is just what the white point is in the picture. So generally the way you do this is you find something that's white, like this plant that's back here, and then you just use that as a reference to make sure that your colors are appropriate. Alright, so let's start off by talking about ISO. So you can go ahead and see right now, by default, it went ahead and set it to 250, but you can actually change this down all the way down to 50. And as you can see, at ISO 50, we get very little light in the image. If I were to turn it up, so I was at 250 originally, but if I turned it up to 400, you can see it's a much brighter image. And you might be thinking, like, why wouldn't I do that all the time? Because if you were to turn it up, you can see you just get a lot more noise. Let me turn the shutter speed up as well, or down, so you can see what it looks like. So at 1600 ISO, you can see that this image is getting very blurry. Like, you get all that grain, you can see that little black spots everywhere. If I were to take the picture, that is basically how it would come out. So let's take a look at this image. You can see the the image over here is just not good at all. We just have way too much noise here and it's just really hard to see. So generally I like to keep my ISO between 100 and 400. So I'll put this at 200, or at least I'll try to put it at 200 for now. And then what you can do when you have a low ISO, you can turn the shutter speed up. So right now it's set to 1/337th of a second. So the shutter will open for 1/337th of a second and then just close. Instead, I'm gonna let it stay open for say about 1/160th of a second. So 1/60th of a second. It's still a pretty dark image. So here's a pro tip. If you want to have really good pictures in low light, you're gonna want to leave the shutter open for longer. Now the problem with that is if you shake the camera, which if you're taking it handheld, you will shake the camera. It's really hard to keep a phone straight for more than 1/60th of a second. Really, that's my limit for how long you can hold a camera or a phone straight, is 1/60th of a second. You can do a little bit longer if you have very steady hands and or you hold your breath, but for the most part, I will tell you, if you're doing a handheld, 1/60th is where you should stop. So you can see it's not good enough, so I'm going to turn this up to ISO 400. Now that looks bright enough to me, and it doesn't look like this has a ton of noise because of the ISO. It's bright enough at 1/60th of a second at ISO 400. I think this would make a pretty good image. But if you do want to take it at a lower ISO, so say you wanted to go down all the way down to ISO 100, then you'll have to turn the shutter speed up. So we will turn it all the way to, well, that's a little bit much, 1/10th of a second. So the shutter will stay open for 1/10th of a second. And for this, I'm using a tripod, and I very much encourage you to use a tripod if you're trying to get low light shots. You really want to use a tripod. And there's many small tripods that you can take around with you that can house your phone. So I recommend picking one of those up. I will have a link in the description to one that I personally have and a couple others that I would recommend getting. So this one is at ISO 100 and 1/10th of a second. And let's take that picture. Now let's compare the two that I just took. So this one is ISO 100, 1/10th of a second. And this one is ISO 400, 1/137th of a second or something like that. So if you're trying to take a low light image, you generally want to take it with a low ISO and a long shutter speed. Now another pro tip here, if you want to take a picture that's a long shutter, I would advise you to set up a timer. So with a timer, when you hit that button, you're not adding shake to it. So your hand alone can also add shake, so you don't want to do that. So instead, you give it a little 2-second pause so it can stop any tremors that you caused when you hit that shutter button. So now I hit the shutter button, and I'll count down. Take that picture for 1/5 of a second, and let's go take a look at it. You can see that this looks pretty good. There is very little noise in this image. So yeah, those are some simple things to know when you're trying to shoot in manual mode using your smartphone.
Alright, that is a quick look at how to use manual mode on your smartphone. If you guys liked it, go and hit that like button. Subscribe if you guys want to see more videos like this, because I will be making more photography related tutorials. But with that, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!